Okay, it's 2 o'clock. We're going to get started here pretty quick. You ready? Okay, my name's Al Bloomer. I'm the chairman of the Red Lodge City Planning Board and Zoning Commission. I want to welcome you to session 2 of our public outreach as we move forward on developing our growth policy as well as this downtown master plan, which will be a large part of that growth policy. Late in 2003, the city contracted with Great West Engineering, who has a vast amount of experience in preparing downtown master plans. And we contracted with Great West Energy, and this is part of our attempt to get input from the community, the various stakeholders, as well as the public in general. So hopefully you all signed in so we know who's here. If you want to have a name tag so you can be called by name, that'd be great. But your input today is valued. We want you to speak up with your ideas, your opinions. There's no bad ideas. There's no wrong opinions. And all of that information will be incorporated as we move forward with this process. Once we finish this public output, Great West will come up with a draft of a downtown planning board or downtown master plan that will be presented to the planning board. That should happen somewhere near the end of this year, hopefully November, sometime in that period. The planning board then will spend several weeks reviewing it, make their comments, and then it will be passed on to the city council for their review, their comments, and hopefully ultimate approval. But again, I can't emphasize enough that this is your time to put your input, and it's valued. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Chad Hansen, who is the project manager for Great West, and he will introduce his staff and take us through the process.
Thanks, Al. Whoa. For those of you I haven't met, which I've met most of you, I'm Chad Hansen with Great West Engineering out of Billings. Jim Jarvis is one of our planners, contract planners, that's been helping me finish the master plan for the downtown. He's got a ton of experience with historic preservation and revitalization of communities through his career. And his lovely wife Sherry's here helping us too, being our scribe and helping us stay on track. So kind of how we'll go through this, Jim's gonna present some background on the plan, what's been done previously, where we're at in the process. And then as we send out, we have 4 discussion topics, and we're gonna kind of open it up to an open forum to gather input from the stakeholders that are here. And then you get to vote on those, prioritize them, and we'll work through those. It worked pretty well this morning, so hopefully it goes as smoothly. It's a little bit of a pivot based on input the planning board received. We decided to change these focus groups up, so we're trying to solicit open input to put in the plan versus comments on a plan we wrote, because we really want it to be Red Lodge's downtown plan when we're done and reflect your guys' priorities and visions. So with that, I'll probably let Jim jump in and go through some stuff, and then we'll start the discussion topics.
Thank you, Chad. Good afternoon. Hello to those folks from this morning's session. Again, my name is Jim Jarvis. I'm a consultant to Great West Engineering. I've been involved with Great West on numerous projects over the last 20-some years. And so this was just yet another interesting project to get involved with. My background, just real briefly, is my wife and I, Sherry, have lived in Virginia City and Butte, Montana for the last 25 years. Been involved with a variety of planning efforts in those communities, a lot of them geared towards heritage tourism development, revitalizing the downtown, dealing with seasonal economies. We actually, Sherry and I ran a business for about 10 years, so we have a pretty good feel as to what the challenges and the opportunities working in the tourism industry here in Montana. So that's me. As to this particular project, as Chad mentioned, I've been involved since April of this year with this particular project. It's a project I inherited. I believe some of you may know Cody Markser and so forth. She was involved with Great West at that time. She did some of the initial outreach and planning work with your community back in late 2023. And then she shared a lot of that information with me, which I've since tried to incorporate into these conversations over the last 6 or 8 months. So regarding the downtown master plan, let me just give a little bit of background. First off, it's important, I think, to recognize where the funding's coming from for this particular planning effort. Montana has a Main Street program since about 2005, and that program works with communities all across the state in the name of kind of tourism development, historic preservation, trying to help downtowns in those various communities strengthen themselves, do a better job of promoting themselves to the outside world with the ultimate goal of improving the local economies in those communities. My understanding is Red Lodge was one of the first communities involved with that program, 2006, and then was formally, accepted into the program in 2016. And then ultimately the funding grant request was submitted by the city of Red Lodge, is my understanding, and that was funded to allow for 2 things: the update to the growth policy for Red Lodge, which I think was last updated in about 2020, and then also the idea of updating the existing downtown revitalization plan. And that was a plan that originally dates from 1986. 84, I believe. And then that plan was updated again in 2006 as an action plan. And now we're looking at doing yet another update 20 some years later. In my experience, looking at those documents going back now over 40 years, I guess the first thing I would say is that I'm very impressed by what this community has accomplished in those 40 years. My wife and I have been visitors to your community over the last 25 years, and we've certainly enjoyed wandering through every 3 to 5 years to enjoy our time here. So it's been interesting, not only as a customer or consumer of your brand, your experience here. We've enjoyed it, but also myself as somebody who kind of geeks out on this kind of work from a community development perspective, I know I've been quite impressed by what I've seen transpire here over the years. So kudos to you folks. And it's nice when, as somebody who does this kind of work for a living, it's nice to see these plans actually get utilized. And certainly that 2006 plan that you folks put together, you can really see that you guys have somebody read it and followed through on a lot of those tasks, and it made my job a lot easier when I stepped into it earlier this year. As to updating that plan, I was able to look at that 2006 plan and basically to see what's still left to be done, and there certainly are things that need further improvement, new opportunities that have presented themselves, and so on and so forth. So again, I've enjoyed the project. Back to the Main Street program, a big part of the Main Street program is based on a model developed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation that's used throughout the country. It's been in place for several decades. And their 4-point approach, as described here, focuses on a few key items: economic vitality, the design, the organization, and the promotional elements of that community, with the idea they've identified that these 4 pieces, if properly encouraged and developed, can really make a big difference in communities. And I think that model has proven effective to a lot of communities over the years. So that, in a nutshell, is what kind of got the program going. And those 4 points are captured in the planning efforts and that we've been working on, trying to kind of pay homage to those 4 points and incorporate them into the thinking that applies here. They were also utilized pretty heavily in the 2006 plan that was done. So that was an easy crossover there. Some folks ask what actually is a downtown master plan. Here's kind of the generic definition of that. Again, it's all about improving the economics and the physical and social aspects of a downtown, trying to optimize what's here based on input from the local community, what makes sense for the businesses on the ground, and what resources are available to further enhance or improve those employment opportunities. Again, I think the operative word is that last sentence there under the downtown master plan. The goal is to create a vibrant and thriving downtown area that benefits both residents and visitors alike. So again, this is the downtown of Red Lodge. In this case, it's as much a creation for the sake of the visiting tourists as it is for the local residents. And I think that's an important point to stress that sometimes gets lost in communities that are very much based on visitation and tourism activity. So again, those 4 points associated with the model: economic vitality, design, promotion, and organization. And we'll kind of drill down on each one of those a little bit as we talk tonight or this afternoon. But I think the activity, the economic vitality piece is really about assisting new and existing businesses. And what does that look like? Each community is a little different. But there are certainly opportunities that can be brought to bear to further diversify the local economy. Design is a big piece of that, especially from a tourism perspective. People come to these communities for an experience, something that they haven't seen someplace else. And so that sense of place, that important sense of arrival, of experiencing something new, is key to the experience, and design is a major piece of that. Fortunately, Red Lodge has a very interesting design, a look, a historic feel wrapped into this incredible natural resource setting. So you guys really have some strong assets to your working in your favor. The final 2 pieces, promotion and organization, in many cases, I find those tend to be the more challenging pieces. That's where your Chamber of Commerce and all your other various local organizations, business groups, and so forth come to play. In small communities, it's, in my experience, the getting everybody organized and pointing in the right direction and working together is a challenge. But over time, it does seem like people figure out where they best fit and ultimately work together to showcase a community's unique characteristics in terms of promotion and organization, again, coming down to cultivating partnerships. It's rare, as you're probably well aware, in small communities, you never really have one organization or entity dedicated to making this all happen. So it requires a lot of different groups working together and all pulling in the same direction to make these projects happen. So that's, in a nutshell, what a downtown master plan is. Why update the downtown plan? As I mentioned earlier, this all started clear back in 1986 when Red Lodge, like many small communities in rural Montana, was dealing with some really tough economic situations. Downtowns were being, in many, vacant or underutilized, and having a hard time supporting the local tax base. It's my understanding, as this community celebrated it or approached its 100 years anniversary in 1986, the town fathers and mothers at that time looked around and said, we better do something different. Obviously the mining and the agriculture that's carried this community for the first 100 years is starting to transition, or in some cases disappear. So we better start looking elsewhere to diversify our local economy. So that was 86. The big part of that plan, and that's the cover of it there showing there. It's quite an impressive piece of work, in my opinion. A lot of architecture, a lot of look at what's on the ground here, what makes this place special from a design perspective, and what can be done to kind of bring back the historic character of the community was the focus of that work. Pretty much a block by block assessment of the community. It's, again, quite impressive. A little overwhelming in its content, and just that there's a lot to it. But that ultimately then, I think, got the community, again, kind of pointed in the same direction in the name of revitalizing the downtown. By 2006, I think I understand Beartooth Highway was closed down after a landslide in 2005. That was kind of a big wake up moment for the community, realizing that there is some vulnerability there. I think some economic development funding was brought to bear, and ultimately this additional planning effort was convened in 2006 and entitled the Action Plan. And like I say, I relied on that heavily based on my initial research and was impressed by the work. And what I can see basically in the last 20 years is that, again, a fair amount of work and recommendations from that plan have been put into place. In fact, I think one of the final pages of that report is a conceptual design for the traffic circle there on the north side of town that now is a reality. It's my understanding it took over 10 years to go from concept to reality, but that's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to those type of projects. But that came out of your 2006 planning effort. So now we're in So the other part of this project, as I mentioned, is the growth policy, which is a planning document that all communities here in Montana rely on, typically updated every 5 to 10 years. And so that was last looked at in 2020. I guess there was an understanding as part of all the infrastructure work that's going on in the community, a desire to update that growth policy. And so that's in the works as we speak. And as a component of that growth policy update, the idea was to also update this master plan for the downtown, so that the two documents would support one another and kind of work in sync as you move forward. Because as we're all well aware, what benefits the community typically benefits the downtown, and vice versa. Whether that's the quality of the infrastructure in terms of the water, sewer, or stormwater systems, or just tourism promotion in general, all that kind of needs to work in sync with one another. So updating both documents, I think, makes a lot of sense. Again, grant money was applied for and ultimately awarded, and that's what's basically funding this effort that's going on now. Started in 2023 with a series of outreach and workshops and so forth with the community. And then we kind of created what I call a rough draft, and that was presented back in May, and now we're looking for additional public input based on that plan, and that brings us to today. And so one of the questions that emerged in my mind as I was starting to look through all this information over the last 6 months is the question, so where is the downtown for Red Lodge? Is it that 3-block area along Broadway that is kind of centered around Pride Park? Is it the next 3 blocks moving further to the north, heading towards Lions Park and your library and so forth, kind of a quiet area in between there, in my opinion? Or is it even larger than that? Is it extending further to the north up towards the visitor center and that lovely new traffic circle? Or is it even continuing further south? So that, I think, is a question that needs to be asked and answered as part of this planning effort, so we can, so you all can focus your time and resources appropriately. But it does appear that your downtown is growing, is changing. And the question is, what would you like that to look like? And certainly you can't have a planning document without some kind of a vision statement. This was a really first attempt on my part to basically distill down the vision statement that was captured in the 2006 action plan. It was a rather lengthy mission vision statement. If for those who may be familiar with the document, it's about a whole page long. It kind of reads like a manifesto. And so I took an effort to try to distill that down into something a little more workable. And so here there's roughly a paragraph here that I think captures the main points from that planning effort from almost 20 years ago. But from what I'm seeing and hearing on the ground these days, that a lot of this still applies. But certainly this would need to be updated and recommitted to as part of this planning effort. And we can talk more about that later. But again, I'm willing to bet a lot of you folks see and hear things that you've talked about before. And as in sync with that vision statement, a lot of you folks, if anything, I can notice over the last 20 years is there's been a lot of efforts done from a marketing and promotional effort of Red Lodge. And it, I think, really shows on the ground. I think it's reflected in the quality of the publications I've seen in circulation regarding tourism development and promotion here in Red Lodge. And this was a brand statement I came across in one of the annual reports of the Chamber of Commerce from just earlier this year. And I thought it had was a nice succinct way of summing up kind of what this community has to offer. And we can visit about that more as well. So again, timeline, as Al and Chad alluded to, again, starting in 2023, early part of this year, kind of getting some kind of a rough plan put together so we all have something to look at. Took some time off for the summer because everybody was busy. And now here we are, September, October of 2024. And the public review, this public comment, asking for your input with the hope that all that can get folded into a draft plan, finalized in the months of November and December, and ultimately submitted for adoption by the community as part of the growth policy update. So that's a kind of an idea as to the timeline and where we're at today. And again, we definitely would like to hear your thoughts. And in support of that, we came up with 4 questions to kind of hopefully get the conversation going. And I'm going to turn it back over to Chad. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right. Before we move on, are there any questions for Jim on the background or the process or where we're at in the process with the master plan?
A building by building survey. And then in 2006, again, we had another architectural building by building survey that was done to physically look at every building and go through. And I just didn't, what's the continuation of that piece? Because the original revitalization master plan, a lot of how our community looks today was driven by that. So how does this plan drive physical architecture in the future?
I'm going to defer to Jim on that one, but.
That is an excellent question. Thank you. I didn't pick up on the updated architecture piece from the 2006 work, but I definitely enjoyed the work from the 80s. As to one of the recommendations that I would like to see happen that I think would be useful for the community going forward from an architecture and design perspective is to distill down a lot of the ideas and the concepts that were captured in the 1984 work, turn it into some kind of a more of a user-friendly primer, a little more of a brochure that can be used to hand out easily and get in front of people as they walk in the door, the town office or the city office, would be my recommendation as a way to get those concepts in the hands of people early on in their projects as they're thinking of doing something with the old building in Red Lodge that they've acquired recently. Let's say they've recently acquired and have big plans for. The sooner you can get those concepts in front of those people, the better in my experience. And certainly if they can, if they have the budget to afford, an architect of their own to help them re-envision their old building that is certainly helpful, but not often is not available from a funding perspective. So again, I guess I'd say going forward, that design primer would be really useful.
Yeah, and to expand on that a little more, Tom, our scope did not include updating the building by building inventory from the 1984 or 6 plan. I get those mixed up. But it definitely is going to talk about overall concepts and the themes and similar to the 2006 action plan and carry that forward. So does that answer your question? Okay. One thing on the microphones, we are tuned in. The city set up a Zoom meeting for people that wanted to listen in. So that's why we're using the mics. So just a question right there.
So at the recent Red Lodge Business Alliance meeting that we had this past week, one of the questions that a lot of folks had was, is this intended to replace those two existing? And this is the only document moving forward, or is this like an amendment or an addition to that?
I may need to defer to Al, and my assumption or understanding is it would be an updated version that this will be the plan moving forward.
Yeah, our charge was to update the current master plan. And that's where we're headed here in terms of replacement or whatever. I think it'd just be an update of the current plan, any additions or corrections that need to be made.
Right. And the basis, the work Jim's done so far, we've tried to synthesize everything from the previous plans. And part of getting this input is to see what's still applicable, what needs to continue moving forward, and what needs to be modified, what needs to be added. So it'll be the basis, but the new plan will be the new plan, I guess, moving forward.
And our intent is to incorporate like what Tom just mentioned and all that. So it could hopefully be one document for reference.
All right. Any other questions, or are we ready to jump into our discussion topics? So the first one is your existing downtown. You guys, as Jim outlined, done a ton of work the last 4 years. What things are working? What do we want to preserve about the downtown and the flavor and the characteristics? I know you've got opinions, Tom. Put them out there. We're going to make a list and then we're going to vote on it.
Just say is that, I mean, clearly Red Lodge is frequently recognized as an award-winning community. So when we're building our downtown master plan, you can't necessarily look at other communities and say, oh, we want to be like them, because we have to be better than them. Right. Like, and so we have to be building a plan that continues kind of our legacy and the people that came before us. I think you would struggle if you went throughout Montana to find another plan that looks like that 84, 86 plan, the Red Lodge Revitalization Master Plan. So my expectation would be this plan will look something better than any plan that anyone has ever seen, because, and it has to, because our community is recognized as being very unique. I always think it's funny to say that, Red Lodge is on the map, and it's kind of a cliche, but if you look at a map of the United States, almost all of them have Red Lodge on it. Even when they're very, entire US maps, Red Lodge shows up on it, mostly because there's nothing else around us. But that, for a community of 2,500 people to show up on a map of the United States says something about our uniqueness. And then also the fact that we are consistently recognized as having one of the best downtowns. I think, you talk about, where we've come in the last 4 years, but I think probably one of the most pivotal moments for me was right at the beginning of COVID. NBC News did a piece on the character of America. And their video was Red Lodge's downtown. And I think that kind of embodies who we are as a community, is that when in a time of turmoil, when a national organization wants to look at what embodies the American idealists of a downtown community, they look at Red Lodge. And so that puts you guys in a, it puts a lot of pressure on you and our planning board to make sure that what gets produced here pays homage to where we've been in the past and the work that's gone before us, and sets us up so that in 30 years, we'll still be that, and not to get set up so that someone goes, well, if we hadn't screwed that up 30 years ago, we maybe would still have one of the best downtowns, right? So I think that's probably a summation of my opinion on it is that, this does matter. It matters for our community. But it matters even more. It matters for our state. I think when they were forming the Main Street program, we were actually involved in that at the base level. And while we may not have, I believe we were actually their first example of a Main Street program. And you do that. You see, again, when Department of Commerce puts out pictures of downtowns, Red Lodge is often that picture. So building a plan that encapsulates that and moves us forward and, figures out where we need to improve.
Yep.
The character of downtown? Okay. Yeah, the Norman Rockwell downtown, you want to preserve the character.
It's vibrant, right? I don't want to be the one who talks the whole time. If you want to know where something's happening in Red Lodge, it's happening downtown, right? Like when people come to shop, they come to shop downtown. When they want to go to a restaurant or bar, they come downtown. And I mean, I even remember when I was first looking at doing a restaurant and I was considering being literally a half a block off of Main Street. And it was made very clear to me early on, there is a huge difference between Main Street and a half a block off Main Street. And I think that's better now than it was 30 years ago when I started, but there's still a lot of advantage to being, our Main Street is maybe, expanded a little bit, with like Babcock and Miles is drawing people off a little bit, and even see Regis draw people out. But the reality is our Main Street is where people want to be.
All right, so what are some other items about the existing?
I got hurt. And if you're talking to the microphone, the people on Zoom can hear you. So give me a chance to get there.
I think the thing about the downtown that we want to preserve is, of course, the historic character of the downtown and the unique owner-operated businesses that are represented downtown.
And you're saying like local businesses, owner operated? Yeah. Right.
I'll just wait till she's done writing.
She appreciates that.
No, she's going very quickly. Yeah. Okay. I think that the zero lot line building construction, the width of the parcels, the width of the buildings downtown, that's all part of that fabric. So if we're going to put a more fine-tuned, word on it, kind of just keeping that fabric of the zero lot line development, the large, traditional front facades, building widths, not going beyond that traditional 20 to 30 feet that you see in these downtowns that people naturally associate with that Norman Rockwell image. So I think it's kind of an intuitive knowledge when you get to that end and you stop seeing the buildings that look like a downtown, you feel like you're out of the downtown. And that's not only a challenge for, being comfortable walking or parking or whatever, that's also a challenge for those businesses who want to push that periphery because they're moving into buildings people don't perceive as part of that greater, downtown neighborhood.
So you're talking, you want to kind of ties back into the historical character and the buildings that go touch each other, zero line. And
Sure. Yeah. So the shared wall, zero lot line, it is density at its essence, but essentially that style of downtown development that, was a consequence of people wanting to be as efficient as possible with the land and the resources they had. And that's kind of the pattern that came out of it. And it turns out it's it's naturally appealing to all of us. We associate it with, with quality development. So yeah.
Just to kind of play off of that too, just consistency in design for extension. So when you do have, I really like where that was at, where it's just keeping that consistency as you move your downtown. Cause that was one of our big discussions this morning, is kind of expanding on our downtown to allow growth and to maximize the spaces that we have, but keeping that consistency when you do so. I think Babcock and Miles did a really good job with that, with a lot of the facades that they have. So if you can continue that with other people as you start to expand that Main Street, I think that'd be really important for, again, keeping that character and encouraging people to expand, because there is that natural click as you're walking down the block of like, yep, I'm still here, I'm still on Main Street. But the second you see a residential home, it's like, now I'm in private territory, if that tracks.
Right.
I'd like to highlight 3 points. The first, I think Jacob used better language, but maybe a way to summarize it is pedestrian-focused architecture. Right? These buildings are historic, meaning they were built before we had cars. And so the buildings are built on a pedestrian scale, and that's what makes a downtown feel like a downtown, when it's full of pedestrian-focused architecture. The second thing I'd like to focus on is the idea that this downtown provides goods and services that residents need and use. So our grocery store is downtown, our hardware store, my insurance office, my accountant's office, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, I was late. I ran into my accountant on the sidewalk. So unlike, say, Big Fork, where the downtown has been mostly filled with galleries and the functions of the residents downtown has moved to a mini mall, we actually have a functioning downtown because it provides things that residents want. And the third point I'd like to focus on is the idea that the downtown is the hub of a walkable community. It's not just that it's a walkable downtown, and I know we've said walkability a lot in our input to you guys earlier. It's also the fact that it's the hub of an entire community that's walkable. So I live 2 blocks off of Main Street, and I am able to walk to the grocery store, the hardware store, the accountant's office, and this meeting. And I think that is what provides that Norman Rockwell feel that we have an entire walkable community. And when we think about the downtown as a hub for a walkable community, that really changes the implications for this downtown plan, because suddenly now we need to be thinking about sidewalks or bike lanes that extend from the downtown out to the rest of the valley bottom and potentially up Highway 78 or out towards the hospital. Are we connected in a pedestrian and bike way from downtown to the hospital? Because that's probably where the future downtown is going to grow. So I would really like to see us preserve that as well.
So keep the one in the back of your mind about the need for sidewalks and connectivity for when we get to opportunities, and bring it back up for me. What other things about the existing downtown do we want to try and preserve? And as we put together this picture vision theme of how you guys want it to look 20, 30 years down the road. You guys are pretty quiet. You must have big lunches.
Yeah, this group is about half the size of the morning
Yeah.
group.
Just to kind of feed off what Tom said as well, just capturing that essence of Americana. Like, I think that is a really good way of putting it. And I think that it is that character piece that we always talk about and revolve around, but it's really that true Americana, American flag flapping in the wind, flowers on the tree or on the light posts, people talking to one another, walking down the main street, running into your accountant and being 10 minutes late to a meeting. That's usually our day-to-day life. So I think that Americana spirit throughout the entire main street is just an important thing to preserve.
All right. Any other things to put on here? So the next step, oh, we got Jeff.
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of reinforce the reference back to the 1986 plan and the architectural drawings and evaluations there were contained within that in terms of the recommendations for maintaining the historic buildings and those looks. I think that's going to be very important to bring those, make sure those ideas are carried forward into this updated plan and that we don't lose sight of those, and that the 86 plan doesn't get buried in a shelf somewhere and never looked at again, because there's some very good ideas in that, and I'd hate to see the fact that those ideas get lost as we move into this update.
No, both plans the city's already done are great plans, and we want to carry that, as much of that forward as we can, so. All right, if there's no other for this list, the next step, everybody's gonna come up, grab a little sticker. You get 3 votes. You can vote for one of these 3 times. You can vote for 3, 2, 1, just what you think the highest priority is. And then we'll get from the group. So just come grab some stickers and put your thoughts up there. Oh, so you gotta go. Oh, you. All right, did everybody get a chance to put stickers up? All right. All right, so the next topic we want to talk about are current challenges you see with the downtown. And first thing out the gate, I had a message from Brian, who couldn't be here. He wanted us to put up there accessibility. With some of these historic buildings, businesses moving in and struggling to bring them up to ADA code and accessibility standards. So he wanted to be sure and put that up there as a challenge. So I could probably name a lot of these. I'm going to guess what you guys are going to say, but what are some of the challenges you currently experience downtown? Say that again.
Sidewalks. Have you walked on our sidewalks?
Yeah, they're pretty
They're
uneven.
they're
Yeah.
uneven. The corners are I know that becoming an engineer only means that you have to pass your test, but whoever designed the corners just barely made any um they were poorly designed. Let's just put it that
For
way.
the record, that was not us. That was
Yes.
MDT.
Yes, it was, yes. It was, and I know I shouldn't go against somebody personally, but they don't work. And
Right.
so we spent money and made an improvement that was supposed to make our lives better, and it made everybody's life worse.
Right.
It's supposed to make it more accessible. Nobody tripped and fell on our old corners, and now people trip and fall on our current corners all the time.
Yep.
Parking,
If we were playing Family Feud, yeah, I could have like top 3 answers are going to be sidewalks, parking, and
I don't know that necessarily it's a challenge, but we have to remember that we are a multi-season community. So while a lot of visitors come in the summer and it's gorgeous and we have flower baskets, we can have a pretty intense winter. So when we start talking about parking and sidewalks, snow, where the snow goes, snow removal, I'm not saying that this committee needs to solve that, but it's something we have to keep in mind that we have to manage as downtown businesses.
so to disseminate that to a bullet point, focus on all 4 seasons versus
Yeah.
just summer.
No, but what I'm saying is that winter, it brings its own unique challenges, just like the sidewalks have been an issue.
Yeah, with the
So-
snow removal and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
It might be 2, but you can probably put it into 1, but it's upkeep and enforcement.
Code enforcement.
Well, yeah, I'll say code enforcement is a challenge 1, but then just general, maintenance, right? So those sidewalks were all new at one point, right? And then they deteriorated over time without any kind of plan to say how we're going to maintain and keep them functioning well. I think they were put in the late 80s through an SID, if I recall correctly. It was before I was here. But then they were never maintained. There wasn't a system to keep those updated. And that can be true of our codes as well. That's why that's a separate thing.
And again, just to kind of feed off of Tom on that one, just systematic infrastructure updates is a challenge on a whole. And I mentioned it before, and I'm going to mention it again, but funding to do that as well. Where does that come from? How do we maintain that budget? How do we move forward and plan for a budget for any of these updates in the future?
I'll just pedestrian bump outs for crossings to make pedestrians more visible. Right now, someone's gonna drive their big coal roller in there and park it 6 inches from the crosswalk, and people have to like crane their necks out around the edge of a truck to be visible, so someone doesn't,
So I might again ask you to put that in the parking lot, if you will, and save it for opportunities. But does that go back to your concerns with the existing ADA corners or not?
Sure.
Working how we hope?
To phrase it as a challenge, pedestrian visibility is
okay.
left severely wanting.
Again, pedestrian safety,
Mhm.
and the ADA, okay.
Yeah, and I think to word it as a challenge as well, Chelsea brought it up, but it's a real challenge to bring commercial activity off of Broadway right now. So it kind of limits the geographic area where those opportunities exist. So the challenge of, growing downtown.
Saying geographical limitations for growth, like off the side streets or south, north? I just want to
It's-
make sure I understand your comment.
It's a challenge to either perceive or to successfully operate a business off of Main Street. I mean, there's a reason that, Babcock and Miles is considered a great success because someone's been trying to do that for a long, long time. Because it's very challenging to bring a business off of Main Street here. So
So one of the challenges
that's-
is pulling the downtown off of Broadway.
Yeah, a lot to do with, the lack of pedestrian infrastructure and things like that, but,
Mhm.
it's just, that is a challenge.
I think there was comments over here, yeah.
As to what Chelsea was saying, is we need to keep the city and the businesses financially solvent. I don't know if everybody knows, but Miles City is financially insolvent at this point. And so it's really important that both the city stays solvent to take care of the sidewalks and all the other stuff that needs to be done, but also the businesses. The other thing is, I had an idea that the majority of the store owners in downtown do not live in the city limits and do not get to vote on how the resort tax is used that they collect or any other city business. And that's a state law. We can't change that. But it would be interesting to always a member of the downtown businesses on the planning board as one of the requirements.
So I would say that a challenge would be suburbanization. If someone decides to build an Albertsons 3 miles outside of town, what happens to our downtown? And we went through this in the 90s, right? The Postal Service wanted to build our new post office outside of the core of downtown. And we insisted on having them stay in downtown because that was such a driver of our downtown business. Post office may not be used quite as much as it used to be. What are the keystone businesses or functions that we have to keep downtown, and what is our plan for keeping them there against suburbanization?
I'll drive off of two things that were just said, and it's that suburbanization piece, but, you know, it goes a little bit to your accessibility piece, is that our governmental offices are all challenged and they are all currently downtown, and keeping those downtown is important. But there's a good chance we could see our courthouse not be owned by the county anymore. Our city hall does not provide much opportunity for the future. And so, there's a threat as we grow a little bit, it's not even a lot, that we outgrow some of these functions that are kept downtown. Like the post office, like the current post office, our county courthouse, our city hall, we're outgrowing those facilities, and where they live in the downtown in the future is important.
So we want to try and keep the government services downtown and accessible, like Tom's saying, and walkable and.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the challenges for the planning board is that we would love to have a buffer around Red Lodge for zoning, so that the county and the city actually agree on maybe 1 mile outside the city limits, where both entities agree on how it's built. Because you could see, for instance, that Albertson being built just outside the city limits, which would draw people away from the downtown, and that's disastrous.
So kind of the county versus city zoning, and there needs
Right
to
now,
be.
there's a straight line, and on the other side is a complete different zoning. So
That's a
having
challenge.
actually a zoning buffer between city and county, we've talked about for a long
for
time.
zoning.
Yeah, and if I might, I wouldn't write county versus city, because that seems conflictive.
Yeah,
I
no,
think
no,
it's,
yeah,
I
that's a
think
good
it's
point.
city, county cooperative area.
Yeah, you just need that buffer zone where you're on the same page. Does that sum it up if we say zoning doesn't fit the growth, or you want a buffer zone between the county zoning, or how should we word that? What? Cooperative zoning. Just put cooperative down. We're good.
Yeah. There used to be a rule that cities could zone outside of them, and it was called donut rule. It was found to be unconstitutional, so it's not a thing anymore.
Unless there's an MOU or something. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So I think, I don't know where this falls into the challenge or the opportunities, but it was mentioned earlier, right now, our downtown is vibrant on Main Street, but we are out of Main Street spots. And I think you mentioned this earlier, we need to define what does downtown look like and what does it look like now? What does it look like in 10 years? How far north and south does it go? And encompassing, thank you for all the compliments about Babcock and Miles. We're not quite there yet, but we're trying. And, it needs to be, I think, for businesses to expand and want to open here, there needs to be spaces available, and that needs to be within the block maybe, or 2 blocks of Main Street, that's inclusive, and we have walking paths and ways to get there, like John mentioned earlier. So it is a challenge right now to draw those folks off of Broadway.
Right.
I really am not trying not to talk too much. Apologize, but there's a thing I'm going to come back to, the opportunity piece, but it also is a challenge, which is, and just is being able to see a future that's better than where we are today.
You're rocking it. How can we get better, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a piece of that, but right, like that's a sense of hubris that can come into it. That's a fallacy, but that attitude of we don't need to improve, right, can bite us.
You can get caught up in that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yes, and that ability. We were just debating bump outs here for a second at our table. It was very lively conversation, but that being able to see something that is different than it is today that may be better, and and I'm giving my side of the argument here. So, but there is another side. But our roundabout that we put in front of the fire station, there was a lot of controversy. It was actually the state that put that in. They said they were going to do it, and then it showed up in the plan. But it came from the state first. But there was a lot of controversy over that, with people really did not want to have that because there was just a lot of lore, and anybody who knows that thing works 10 times better than what we had before. And so sometimes seeing a future that's better, even when you're getting a lot of pushback, is a challenge. So I'm trying to, just explain this in a way that makes sense. But the challenge is that there may be a better future that we need a vision to be able to see.
Right. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tom, but we can't get caught in the past and just keep doing what we've been doing. We got to be willing to be visionary.
You have to figure out ways to do things that may be different, that may make us more efficient.
Right.
They touched that in the first section, but they called it thinking outside the box.
Yep. All right. Are you guys ready to put some stickers up there? And again, take 3 stickers, put the ones you think are the biggest challenges the business community's facing downtown, and vote however you'd like, and then we'll move on.
You didn't hear what I was saying?
Exactly. Actually, just when you bring up that last parking space, right? Well, now that is no spot. You lose parking space, but it's not on the sidewalk and it's not.
And she doesn't get vote on it.
Because they're walking down.
He wants a cement fund out. So you want one that's.
All right. Did everybody get a chance? I hope so, because I took them down. So opportunities, I know, John, I asked you to park one. Connectivity, was the one you wanted? There's an opportunity to increase the connectivity from downtown to other parts of the community? Does that kind of sum up your thought from before? And then there was another one I asked. Jake, what was the one you wanted to, I asked you to bring up for opportunities? So definitely improve the.
Pedestrian bump outs at intersections.
And Tom seconds that.
I mean, I think that the piece there is that we do have an opportunity to have a vision that is better for the future. But what we were talking about specifically was having a visionary. And if you look back at the original Red Lodge revitalization plan, I mean, think about the guts it took in the mid-'80s to build a plan that redesigned every business on Main Street and adopt that for our future. I mean, it was a lot of work. It was almost all done by volunteers, by the way. And it took a lot of vision into the future to say that, hey, this rock face they put on the front of the Natali Cafe should never have been put there, and it should come off, and you should have a front that looks like it did in the 1920s. And that, I mean, that's a big piece. And And if you look at their vision, right, 70% of the things they outlined in that plan are done. I mean, if you look at our buildings downtown, a lot of them have been remodeled the way they saw them then. And so that vision is an opportunity.
All right, what other opportunities do you guys see moving forward?
I think increase activities that aren't just going to the bar. But more events throughout. It can be small things. It can be yoga with goats for all I care, but things like that. I think there's more opportunity to create more happenings in our area at smaller scales. It doesn't have to be a huge event every time, but there should be more things going on that just make it easy to hop in and do. I know we do a lot, and so everyone says like I'm crazy for that, but truly, like, if you have someone call you mid-September, like, what's going on today? It's like, well, the pass is closed in October, or the mountain's not open yet. Like, what are some of these other opportunities for activities that aren't necessarily weather dependent, not necessarily skill dependent?
And events. What other ideas do we have out there? John.
So we have an opportunity to build from success. As compared to 1986, where Red Lodge was failing and we took this wild shot at that revitalization plan. Now we're vitalized. And so we can build on that, the activities, we can build on the popularity, we can build on, we actually have people with money in town now who can invest in downtown. So we build on success.
We have some current opportunities to build workforce housing to relieve the problem of, there's a difference between a workforce and affordable. What's affordable for one isn't affordable for another. But we do have some opportunities right now in town to build or encourage developers to build workforce housing. That's a huge opportunity that we have that we can't just ignore.
Right, this goes a little bit on what John said is, we have been successful and because of that, we have two opportunities. One is we have a resort tax that, is collected by our downtown and provides us with an opportunity to reinvest so that we can continue to collect. So it provides us an opportunity to fix some of our issues because we have funding.
Yeah, it's a funding source a lot of communities don't have.
Exactly. The second thing is that, we represent a lot of what Montana wants to be, and we are successful. And as a result of that, there are grants that are open to us because we help represent Montana as Montana should be, I think. And so, when Department of Commerce looks at the money it collects and how it wants to vest in making, having a community that exemplifies where they want Montana communities to be. We have a vital downtown. We're continuing to grow. We have all the things that we've talked about in the past, and I think that gives us an opportunity to continue that.
Did you have a comment, Terry?
Right? Just one table. Vertical density. So I think that is an opportunity that people are really hesitant to try and approach, just because we do love our skyline, we love our views, and I'm not saying to eliminate that in any way or infringe on that, but take advantage of vertical density when it's an option, because that will help us to prevent from urban sprawl and to also make better with our infrastructure that we currently have, as well as reduce costs of essentially expansion.
I really love that point. I couldn't think of a good way to say it. That was perfect. But I think I was swirling with the idea that, there has never been, like, Red Lodge is having a moment, right? Like, we're getting #1 cutest town and a bunch of different magazines and all that neat stuff. And there's more people moving in and more money, and property's never been more valuable / expensive. There really is so much more certainty that a big investment into a multi-story building downtown is going to, it's a more, I don't want to say sure thing because there's no such thing, but there's a greater likelihood that you will find success in developing a multi-story building in downtown Red Lodge than there ever has been before, since there was coal mining and people just did that naturally. So I don't know if there's a way to articulate that in the plan, but yeah.
What about this table? You guys have been kind of quiet. What opportunities do you see?
It's an opportunity for a meeting and seminar location. Businesses that would like to have group meetings. that
Like a
might come-
mini convention center meeting
Sure.
room?
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be large, but there are a lot of businesses that do offsites and they'd love to come to Red Lodge.
I know there's, lots of organizations, like professional organizations I'm a member of, that would love in your shoulder seasons to have a conference in Red Lodge, because people would love to come down here in September or October versus going to one of the big 7 where we always end up.
I'll say just, this goes back to the challenges, is that capacity sometimes is our issue, right?
Mhm.
So we can do great meetings up to about 50 people.
This
But
is a great venue right
This,
here.
yeah, but this is a great venue. And you can do a couple hundred people here if you can put it together. It's an opportunity.
I mean, this is nice, but it's not very nice. And there's no food or beverage. So you'd have to contract that out. And it's nice with Rock Creek Resort and Pollard that one-stop shopping.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand the potential to develop, what did you say, the auditorium or which? The theatorium. Yeah. What else you guys have out there? Big opportunities. You guys are supposed to be the innovators. All right. Oh, Chelsea's got another one.
There's something that is an opportunity that is right here at our door, and it's just exciting.
So expanded public spaces, starting with the Rocky Fork.
Yeah, expanding on public spaces, but specifically that one, because it is right there, it is happening. And it is kind of an open page where we can figure out what we want to do there. Is it going to be green space? Is it going to be parkway? Is it going to be walkway? How do we connect it? Like, I think it is a really inviting opportunity that doesn't have a lot of conflict around it, and it can open up a bigger conversation of a bigger plan by being a nice little intro piece to that conversation.
Yeah. It's the Airbnb that got destroyed in the flood, or bed and breakfast.
I'll just add to the thing that's kind of, we've talked about a little bit with resort tax providing us with opportunities, but one of the things that we do is we now have a new pool in and close to our downtown, which again is walkable, right? And there's been a lot of talk about, we have an incredible group of people who maintain an ice rink that could really be developed into something that would be an amazing attraction for our downtown and our downtown area. Again, walkable and communal and something to do, you know, and I offer that as an opportunity specifically, but it's also an example of seeing, you know, that ice rink over the last 15 years has gone from something that nobody really used, but a little bit, to it's, you know, something that's used every day by all kinds of people. It has events every weekend. People come from Billings to use it. And so you look at that piece, say, you know, we have opportunities that can help enhance our downtown, if whether they're in the downtown or on the edges of the downtown, that will then also help our businesses be more successful. Because if we go back to our challenges, one thing that we didn't really talk about, and it is a huge threat to our downtown, is the seasonality of our community. It is very difficult to be in business in this town because of the seasonality. If I did the business I do in June, July, August, and September all year round, I would be sending people to these kinds of meetings because I wouldn't need to be here. And in a way, that's what makes Red Lodge wonderful, and why I love being here, is that it is a challenge to operate a business in this community. But it is a challenge to operate a business in this community. You can't, and it's better than it used to be. It used to be we made money 2 months of the year and lost it 10 months of the year. Now we can make money 4 months of the year and lose it 8 months of the year.
And so the ice rink is an example of expanding community facilities to support downtown, kind of out.
Yeah,
The downtown, because if you can, you know, I mean, if you think of iconic New York City, right?
Mhm.
It drives you to Rockefeller Center, right? And you know, like, you know, the ice skating in the city, and the having the ability to have park space close to and incorporated with a downtown really helps to enhance a downtown. And so, you know, we've got our Pride Park, but you have the ability to walk to Lions Park, to walk to a pool, to walk, you know, that walkability, you know, it really enhances for the people who live here and for the visitor to have that all connected. You know, one of the things I think we struggle with park space in our community is because we're connected to the largest park space in the country, right? But we still need the small, intimate park space in the downtown areas.
Just to piggyback that, our numbers at the pool are 30% of the users are from outside the city, the pool.
Do we have a pretty good list, you guys feel ready to vote, or do we want to add anything else? All right, let's get some stickers. All right. So the last discussion topic is the vision, what your community and the business community wants to see or pictures for the next 20, 30 years for the downtown. As part of that, like Jim said, he tried to synthesize the vision from the 2006 action plan, get it down to a paragraph there. So read through that a little bit. We didn't want a lot of comments on the plan. We wanted input, but we do want to know what still applies here, what you think is still important. If there's stuff that's no longer applicable, that would not be part of the vision. And to Tom's comments, we need to keep going forward and try and be visionary and not just rely on what has worked so far, what we can do better, right? So we'll open it up. What are some of your thoughts and ideas on the vision and the existing vision statement?
I would like to see some economic development outside. The tourism is wonderful, but we do have, 10 months of non-tourism or very light. And it would not be really, really lovely if we could have some good economic diversity.
Okay. And so that kind of maybe speaks to the part in there, augmented by professional services and specialty manufacturing intended to diversify employment opportunities. So we're not reliant on service industries and the seasonal, okay.
I think we need more diverse housing, more apartment buildings, and not just dedicated to poor people, but opportunities for people to have a place to live where they could, without having to buy a house or rent a house.
Sorry for this, but that's very blah to me. Like you could put that to any downtown in Montana, right? So how is our vision better than others? I think we're missing in this vision, we're missing the uniqueness of character that really defines what Red Lodge is. I think our closeness and proximity to the largest contiguous wilderness in the United States provides us with, there's a sense of roughness, it's a sense of toughness that is Red Lodge, right? Like the fact that you really could get eaten by a grizzly bear when you walk out of the downtown, like means something here. It's not just hypothetical, and so there is a part of that the fact that you can walk into the bar and the person who just mopped the floor at the hotel down the street and the guy who has a huge investment in Silicon Valley are sitting there having a drink together and chatting. That's a common thing in our community that I don't that I think is really important. I think the people who come to visit our community are very diverse in their economics, and I think that's a piece that's important in our community. So there's something to me. I think at a base when you read this, you're like, yeah, that's okay. Like it sounds good, but it doesn't to me say, hey, if you were to build this in a virtual city, right, it wouldn't be the virtual downtown that everybody looked to be where they wanted to go. Friendly, open, community, non-judgmental or judgmental in an okay way.
Did you want something up there, Tom, about the outdoor opportunities and the tie to the wilderness and the park?
The tie to the closing, but I think what I'll relate this to something I really know nothing about, which is art. And, you know, for me, when I look at an art piece that's amazing, I'm like, that looks really amazing. And if you were to ask me why, I would tell you I have absolutely no idea. And I think there's a piece of when people come to Red Lodge, they think it's amazing, but you can't pin it down to one piece. You can't pin it down to one part of it. It is the whole as it's taken as a whole, and that's what makes Red Lodge so incredible. And I mean, if you were to ask anybody who lives here or people come from all over the country. I have friends who come here. We bring people here. I bring conferences here from people from all over the country. And every time they say Red Lodge is amazing and we really want to come back and I want to bring more people here. And we go to places all over the country and they don't say that about other places. And so why is that? And I don't really know, but it has to be part of that vision.
You're not helping much. So we're jotting down things. So people want to visit, the friendliness, the community, openness is celebrated. Is that kind of some of the stuff encompassing?
But I think there is a piece saying there's a part of Red Lodge that
Right.
So what you were talking about just now is a really interesting concept about why you like art and why you don't know why you like art. And it's summed up really well in a short video that you can find on YouTube by Simon Sinek, and it's called Start With Why. You've probably seen it. So if we were to jump off of that, his message is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? And so if you were to translate that to this exercise, he would ask you, what are your I believe statements, right? Because people come for that. And that's that part that speaks to your gut or is, you know, in the back of your brain that doesn't really hold language and reasoning, but it just gives you that, right? So if you were to be able to put that in, we believe, Red Lodge believes in this statements, what might that look like?
and one word is authentic.
I
You know, I
love
think
it.
about
I
it, you know,
love
we
that
talk
word.
about chains and chain restaurants, and if you like walk into Bogart's, you know, I mean, I think you can go all over this country and get to places that try to be like that in an authentic, and they just don't get there, right? Like, and I'm not saying there's not other places that maybe are better or do a better job, because there probably are. But like, if you look at a lot of, especially chain restaurants, they try to mimic that in order to pretend they're authentic, but they're not. But the businesses, and I think, you know, Kim was talking about this, is that the fact that we are owner operated matters because it makes us authentic, and we're not perfect, but that's what life is. Life is messy and it's about being real, which is often not perfect.
Well, the first forum this morning, at the closing, as I mentioned, I work in communities across the state. And it blows me away every time I'm in Red Lodge and we do any public outreach, the public actually shows up and you guys, and everybody's invested. You might not all agree, but y'all get along and everybody cares about the community. And it really shows, and in the authenticity and that care and the passion. So it's a really difficult job on our side to try and capture that, which, just for the record, Tom, that's the community's vision statement from 2006, kind of synthesized down. And it does seem generic, but trying to capture the uniqueness of Red Lodge on paper, that's a tall task.
And I think a bit of that too, just to kind of play off that authenticity, is a lot of it is the shared experience. And whatever that experience looks like, each one of us come from a different background, different location, different place. And we bring that to the table, which creates this wonderful, tasty melting pot of flavor. And, but it, again, truly just shared experiences, but also bringing past experiences, culture, lifestyle, That is that uniqueness, I think, is that we have cultivated a place that people want to live. And with that, we have brought people from all over the country, all over the world. And they keep bringing their different past experiences, their different cultures to one place with the shared goal of having good neighbors, a good time, and a good place to live, and wanting to maintain that and bringing their best person forward to be that best neighbor. Does that track?
We're trying to.
Capture emotion on paper? Is that a
Everyone
thing?
celebrates shared experiences and diversity is maintained. Good neighbors.
So I think one thing, when I think about this, I've been here for 20 years full time, and before that coming here for 40, is that we embrace the Montana lifestyle. We embrace the small town charm, and that I hope in, 2030 and going forward, that we have kept that in mind whenever we've done. I also think we're fiercely protective. We're protective of our history. We're protective of the outdoors. And it's just such a unique community because we all take care of each other. And so I don't know how you encapsulate that, but I always tell people when they come here and they visit, the thing I love about Red Lodge is that Dickens charm. It's the Red Lodge stroll and the street is closed and the music is playing. It's the 4th of July and it's like the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation Fun Run. Like those are like the shining moments that we have in this town. How do we build on that and keep that heritage going to continue what we're doing today? So.
And Kim touched on one of the things that Red Lodge is really good at, and that's volunteerism. I bet everybody in this room belongs to something and donates their time. Okay. 2, 3, 4, but there's a lot of nonprofits in Red Lodge, probably more than what's in Billings. And they're all very active in the area. So I think the volunteerism here makes us very unique.
In the back there, Al. Robert. Oh.
You want to make this walk? Get my steps in.
So from the earlier session today, and again, in this session, what I keep hearing is that it's not just tourism as far as our vision, it's not just the economy, it's our strong community. So this bit about to enjoy their sense of community, I would say people come here to enjoy our strong community. It's what makes us charming, what makes us, Red Lodge.
And it's something that all of us can be a part of. I remember the first time I was here, people were really friendly. The second time we visited, ran into somebody on the street who remembered me from the year before and called me by name. And that's not unusual here. And it's kind of contagious. And I think that's really major.
I do think that the community here is something that few touristy mountain towns have anymore. And I really hope that within the community's vision is included the notion that, that is very often taken for granted by communities who find success and tourist notoriety. There are more than we can count mountain towns in the West now that had this moment 20, 30, 40 years ago and didn't prioritize their local residents who are working, who are teaching, who are going to school, who are making up those members of the community that not only residents value, but people who come here to visit value. So I think a vision of Red Lodge, in 2030, 2040, 50 is one where locals can still live a relatively normal life, and not one that is a Disneyland Jackson type of kitschy destination because that's just not, then it's not Red Lodge anymore.
And I think that there is a bit of that too. Again, I think one of the beautiful things of this community is people do come from everywhere. But the big thing kind of going off of what Kim said is it's not that people are coming in trying to like, oh man, I love this, but I wish it were this. It is truly people are wanting to add to the experience and increase it or amplify it or enhance it, but not change the experience. They want to maintain the culture of this community and be a part of this community, not create a community around it. That tracks.
Absolutely. No NIMBYs. All right. Any other thoughts before we start the stickers? Oh,
So the question that we started with at the beginning, we haven't really answered, but I'm curious is what does downtown look like in 20 years? You know, is that part of this? Do we say it's 2 blocks off of Broadway, you know, in each side? And does it go to the hospital? Does it go to the roundabout? Like, what is our vision? I think John brought up a really good point with, you know, the roundabouts. I think we all kind of struggled with it, but the pedestrian pathway, you know, from downtown, what it is today, you know, to the roundabout to the hospital, it's a little bit of a struggle. You know, I don't think you could walk to the hospital. You could try. I don't know. So my vision personally of that is yes, that I would love to see it be 2 blocks, 1 to 2 blocks off of Broadway on both sides, because we're going to need it if we continue to attract businesses. And then how far south do we go? Do we, you know, I don't think past where the community church is that's probably not really going to change too much. But are we at the roundabout? Are we at, you know, the dollar store? What is our, or is it in where, you know, First Interstate Bank and Silver Strike is? I mean, like, is that type of thing? So I feel like that is something we need to have at least kind of a basis for what we think it will be or should be. If we keep calling it downtown, because you guys even said it's 3 blocks. And in my opinion, right now, it's more like 6 or 8. So what, right.
so it's a little off topic, but
I was going to say, I think she asked the critical question, and I think what we're going to try to do is accumulate all this stuff and come up with something and then have you all review it and see how close we get. And that'll come from Great West after they gather all this data.
that's exactly what I was gonna say, Alice. So that would be part of our next steps is we're gonna gather this input. Jim's gonna put together the final draft plan and he's gonna, based on what we've heard, take his best stab at drawing a map around the downtown. And then the planning board and part of the public comment process, you guys can say no, yes, needs to be bigger, smaller. And that's more of a item we think if you have a map in front of it, it's easier to comment on. And so, but I think we're getting a lot of good input in these sessions and that we can draw the initial, this is our best, based on what we heard, this is what we think the downtown is. You guys tell us if we're on the right track, wrong, what you want it to look like to define the area for this master plan. So it would be part of the next steps. Okay. Are we ready to put some stickers up on what you guys think are the most important items for the vision? Or do you want to add any more? All right, well, let's do some stickers.
Laminated one that we can draw. When you guys do the map, get a big laminated one that you can draw. So people can make notes. They're gonna be sweet. Oh,
your house to be torn down and set up a brick building, right? Like that's a, you know, that's a pretty visionary moving forward statement, you know?
Good stuff.
We're completely off kilter when you go and look at Sam's and the dollar stores. And they had this idea that they were gonna build, like, the reverse frontage wasn't supposed to mean the back of the building is on the main street, and yet it's still in there,
Yeah.
it is, and that has to, like, I hope that's changing in the growth policy, but it's just still in there, I mean, and. Put in there.
So it's planning board's fault.
Well,
And we missed it.
I mean, honestly, the zoning, it is, it's a mess, it's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess, I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, I commented the last time, and I don't remember if it got placed in the zoning regulations, but it was I could have gone and, you could go and put a residential house with a yard on Main Street.
I think we fixed that.
Yeah, you know, yeah, I mean, but that's, you know, again, that was in the code.
Yeah. You know, we're finding inconsistencies between ordinances and zoning now. Yeah, no, we got some work to do. That's
Well, I
okay.
mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I pointed out. I mean, even, there's a, and I've made a comment on this, like, you know, last time, there's distances on how long you can have a wall frontage. Like, if you look at, the one thing we started out that, you know, because you can't have 50 feet of the same building frontage. The college got 100 feet of the same building. You know, so what is it that we don't want about that, right? Like,
I'm really glad you brought up the ice rink, because if you didn't, I would, because the last time I checked, it was amazing how many people came to the rink and then ate dinner for a night.
it's, yeah.
I'd like, hoping somehow we figure out the code. Oh, fuck, you really understand.
Ice first, cover second. is my
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah. Artificial ice rink.
The artificial
Yeah,
ice
yeah.
first.
And they're portable units, so you can purchase them.
Yeah, I've got pricing on, you know, it's about $1.8 million by the time we're done.
Yeah.
Put that in.
It's in there, some pretty good used ones around.
Yeah. A lot of it still getting the surface and, you know.
And I think Bob already talked to the mayor about that. It's on his radar to level that.
Yeah. We should find a level where we put like this thing, let's just bring in some topsoil and level that. We should do that now, next week.
All right. So that kind of was our discussion items. I didn't even look at the time to see where we're at. Well, we're pretty on time, about 10 minutes left. So any wrap-up questions, comments for us or for Al and Jeff and the planning board?
I think the piece for me is that when you look at those other plans, they gave not only a written, but, you know, like, if you look at the picture with the bump outs, and, you know, the other plans gave a visual vision of what the community would look like and how it would be better. And I think that's an important piece of it. You know, I think having a picture that you know, that people can see that says, hey, this is how this would look, and this is why this would be better, even if it's just one example of, you know, how can we improve our corners? How can we improve our sidewalks? I mean, you know, I'm fully in on the vision that's in there with the bump outs as it is now. But I think having that vision is really important.
since we have a few minutes, I wanted to ask a few follow-up questions. Looking at that 2006 action plan, one thing that was kind of really, I guess, a big deal back then that I haven't heard much talk about lately, but yet seems relevant, the idea of like a downtown town square gathering space, larger pavilion was picked up in 2006. And is that still a thing? I see you have a farmer's market and all that, and I see the Lions Park area. And it looks like the ice skating rink is very popular. But is there a need for a larger outdoor venue?
That ice rink with a covered pavilion, something that was about 100 by 200 that was covered, built in timber that looks like an old railroad. And so then in the winter, it's an ice rink, and in the summer, it's for things like farmers markets or weddings or
Yeah.
Put the wall in the cover, lots of stuff.
It does seem like an opportunity, and you've seen that utilized elsewhere in other communities. And it seemed like there was talk about how to expand your downtown perhaps in a northerly direction. That all seems to tie in kind of nicely, and in my opinion. It's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Right. Right. Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that does change things. Okay, I see that. And then one other question I had from a funding perspective, I think Tom spoke to this a little earlier. The resort tax, I mean, it seems like a lot of that's been focused very specifically on infrastructure investment, which is kind of what many communities use resort tax for. So, but someday you probably will get a handle on your infrastructure. It would be curious to start the conversation as to what would be another use for resort tax funding, for some of these programs we're talking about, 10 years down the road. But along that line of funding, I haven't heard much talk, or at least recently, but I heard about this a couple months ago, the grant that was awarded through your Red Lodge Community Foundation, the Paul Brune National Park Service Rehabilitation Grant. Okay, so that's some real money that's looking at being invested in your community to incentivize certain buildings, I assume, to get restored or renovated. So that's still a work in progress. And I guess I would just ask the question, that seems, that's one-time only money, meaning at some point you will spend that $750,000. Is that something that you would look at to your resort tax in the future to create, continue such opportunity for rehabilitation grants to incentivize developers? I just wanted to offer that idea. But the Paul Brune stuff, that's happening. Okay. Well, that's very exciting. Okay. Well, thank you. I was wanting some clarification on those 2 points. Right. And again, I agree that's a good use for it and what it was intended for, quite frankly, I believe. But looking 5, 10, 15 years down the way, I believe it's up to your community to decide with certain limits from a state perspective as to how you can use those funds. But It doesn't have to be just invested in the infrastructure, is, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, it could get controversial trying to figure out a way to invest that into private property. And but I think that Paul Brune program was intended to be a pilot project to get the community thinking along those lines, is my understanding of that program. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, that was a good 2 hours. We can't thank you enough for the comments and your ideas and your vision. The challenge is going to be, how are we going to reduce that to wording in a document? Some of these things are very difficult to define. For example, Tom mentioned the art, but if I asked you to define coordination, it's something you know when you see it, and when it's not there, you recognize it, but how do you define it? How do you put it in words? And that's going to be the challenge here. I think we're up to it. I hope we are. But again, on behalf of the planning board, the city council, and the mayor, and Great West, we really appreciate your input. And to remind you again, the process, we're going to do this again at 4 o'clock, or 6 o'clock, I'm sorry. And we're going to take all this information and try to accumulate it, prioritize it based on your stickers, reduce it to writing, reduce it to a map, and then it'll be reviewed in a public format by the planning board. Hopefully we can get that done by November or earlier. And then once we do that, it'll go to the city council again in a public format, which they will review and hopefully approve. And then it will become an addendum or part of the growth policy, which we're currently working on. So thank you, Chad and Great West. One more to go. And you all have a good evening. Appreciate it.